are people. People are complicated creatures, especially when you're trying to meet the one. Doesn't always work out, does it? As we're about to find out. So keep your pepper spray in hand, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I had been sent to Korea from my university a few years ago. They told me for my major I had to go somewhere in Asia, and my friend had really talked up Korea for me. I knew nothing about it, but I decided what the hell and embarked on a semester-long trip. I had only one serious boyfriend in my life, who I had broken up with a few months prior. I also don't enjoy one-night stands and wasn't digging the dudes at the clubs in Seoul, but I still wanted to have some sort of romantic experience. So my friend recommended I use this dating app to meet English-speaking Koreans. That way, I could meet someone and experience the actual dating culture. I thought, I'm young, why not? I was just so eager to have the new experience. Maybe it sounds dumb to try dating in a foreign country, but it worked out for me eventually. Just not the first date. I met him on a dating app after being in Seoul for 3 weeks. We'll call him Tim. I still didn't know the culture or city very well, and was a bit naive about everything. He eagerly wanted to meet for a date after talking to me, and he seemed nice. I should have asked more questions, and I should have noticed that he was not giving me many details about himself. Tim was a guy a little older than me, but claimed he was a college student. I assumed he had done his military time, which all men in Korea have to do, and returned to school. We talked for a bit and decided to meet for a tea date near the school I went to. He wanted to come to my dorm originally to pick me up, but I live in an all-women's dorm and didn't want him to know exactly where I lived since we were still strangers. So instead, I insisted we meet at the main town center near the subway. He really didn't like this idea, which, looking back, was a red flag. But eventually I insisted. The night of the date, I waited an hour for this guy. He was very late. Tim weirdly claimed he just wanted to make me wait. I thought he was kidding and messaged him a laughing emoji, assuming he was just lost. When he finally arrived, he was much smaller than I thought, but a man's height has never been something I care about much. He was also quite thin. Maybe I let my guard down because I didn't see him as physically threatening to me, which was a mistake in the end. Right off the bat, he was way too touchy with me and breathed creepy and heavy. I was so put off by his demeanor. I'm usually very tolerant with different personality types, but this was very odd to me. I had been told that Korean men would be polite and not so touchy on the first date. He was also dressed oddly like in business attire for a date, but I thought that maybe it was just a Korean thing. The first thing he said to me was, "You're not as white as I thought you were." I thought this was a translation error, that his English was near perfect, so I asked for clarification, and he said what he meant. "I thought you would be more white. Your skin is darker, and your eyes aren't green. Are you pure European?" Now I was officially weirded out. First of all, I'm pretty much as white as you can get. I'm Irish and Scandinavian, so white as hell basically. So the fact he thought I could have possibly been any whiter was funny. And why did he care in the first place anyway? Why does my skin color matter to this guy? And why is he bringing it up? He said it about 3 times on the date, how he wished I had greener eyes, and every time I would just reply, "Well, maybe my online photos make me look brighter," and brushed it off as him being nervous and trying to start a conversation. Isn't it funny the dumb excuses you make for people when you're panicked? When we arrived at the tea place, I tried to order a basic raspberry tea, and he stopped me and told me I had to have this specialty. I thought it was weird he wanted to choose my tea for me, but in my head I brushed it off once again. He really insisted I drink only this type of tea, and I just agreed. These small details become weirder later. After tea, he asked if we could look around my school. It was dark, but the school is very well lit, so I agreed. And the whole time we walked around, he would randomly stop and grab me for long hugs. At first, I let it happen, but then I stopped him, and he continued trying. He kept grabbing me and breathing hard into my neck. It was so awkward. He also wouldn't tell me any personal details about himself. I asked so many questions, desperately trying to distract from all the awkward grabbing, and to try and get to know him. But he would never tell me anything. He even said at one point, "I'm a mysterious man," like a movie line. He also said something like, "You look so much like my favorite movie character." I asked him who that would be, but he said that I would need to figure it out on my own. Finally, he said, "I want to go to a dark area." And in my head, I screamed, "Hell no." At this point, I wanted the date to be over fast. He somehow knew there was a wooded area behind my campus, and he said that we should go there. I said no, and that I wanted to stay near the main campus in town, but he kept pushing. Finally, he grabbed my arm and started dragging me there. He said, "I can't let anyone see," and I started to panic. I finally ripped my arm away and just demanded we leave and go back to the main road immediately. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't ask for help or get angry. Maybe I was scared, but I just began to book it back to the main road, and he followed. We ended up in front of a hospital near the town center, and I told him it was time for him to go. I made some excuse, and he was pleading with me to stay. I told him, and lied, that we could meet the next day, and that I would message him. I just wanted to get away at this point. I was pretending everything was fine in order for him to go. Suddenly, I think he's leaning in to kiss me, and I immediately think, "Oh God, no," but it was so much worse. Instead, I feel pain in my face. It takes me a second to realize he was biting my face. It was like a dog. I had never felt the sensation before. He leaned his head sideways and bit me on my nose and cheek as hard as he could. I screamed and pushed him away. His face looked so freaky. I barely had any time to react in words. Instead, I ran up the sidewalk until I saw a convenience store on the right, ran into the back of the store, and bent down and started to cry. The man who owned the store started to yell at me, but I couldn't explain my situation. I just begged him in English to let me stay, and I ended up having to buy a popsicle to stick around. God, I wish I had learned some Korean by then. I guess Tim didn't follow me. I appeared outside the store and didn't see him. I texted a friend and waited for them to get me to take me back to my dorm. On the way, I messaged Tim and basically told him to stay away from me. I told him he was a creep and that he shouldn't bite women, and something along the lines of me calling the police, and then blocked him. I was so scared to walk around my school area after that. I was so afraid he would find me somehow, and I'm so thankful I never let him pick me up at my dorm. I called my mum to tell her what happened, when suddenly she said, "Wait, what did he ask you?" She then put some details together and realized all of these weird things had to do with the 50 Shades of Grey books. At first, I thought she was just being silly and overthinking a bad date. I thought she was joking. But oh god, she was right. She'd recently seen the movie or read the book. The eye color, the way he dressed, and the tea he made me drink, and the random lines he said, it all matched the books and movies for his dirty little fantasy. My mum thinks he picked me because I looked like the girl from the movie to him. It explains why he was so fixated on my appearance and his whole thing with the biting and trying to dominate me. Even if it wasn't his intention, I later learned that there are a few creeps who seek out foreign girls to dominate and sleep with as a prize. They call it riding the white horse, or something along those lines. On a happier note, this bad experience didn't stop me. I eventually met someone else in Korea, and we ended up falling in love. We even did the whole long distance thing, and now I'm living in Korea studying and working, hoping to marry soon. So I guess I didn't let bad creepy guys stop my life. As for Tim, let's not meet. It's been years, but I will still kick your ass if I see you, and I won't have to bite. My father had been dating this girl for a while, and things were going great. She met us a few times and got along great with my sister and I. Eventually, my father asked her to move in with us. She drove 7 hours to move in and brought along her 2 cats. Things were great for the first 2 months, until she couldn't find a job. They had agreed that she would apply for jobs and have one secured for an interview before she moved in. She moved in on July 2nd and still didn't have a job until late January. I, being fresh out of high school with no experience in a job setting, was able to get a job before her. This caused my father to have to cover her car payments and insurance, which set us back financially. Then October came with the discovery of a full year's worth of text messages between her and a friend of hers named Jared, all taking place after my father and her were dating, and all while she was still living in her hometown. These text messages were laced with him coming over and giving her nighttime lovins and inappropriate pictures. My father confronted her about it, and she denied it, saying we just didn't understand her friendships. My father lets it go, as they hadn't messaged each other in weeks. Small arguments pop up, and she starts sneaking money out of my dad's wallet at night to go buy cigarettes. This may only sound like small amounts, but it was a nightly occurrence. This set us back financially as well. These arguments mainly consisted of her lying about something and not admitting it, or her doing something stupid and not apologizing. Things got worse as Christmas came. My father expressed that he didn't love her anymore. He didn't have any feelings towards her, and that she needed to work to fix the relationship if she wanted to continue. This meant really trying to get a job and not lying about everything. She agreed that she would. I advised him against giving her the option. I was tired of this and wanted her out. She began lying more and more and causing more problems. We believe she started taking some sort of drug, as she would come back from a drive all shaky and spazzing out, spouting nonsense. She came after myself and a friend of mine during one of their arguments, to which my father responded, "Pack your stuff and get out. How dare you go after my kids? Telling her to get out and leave was a regular occurrence in their fights, but she never took the hint. She was abusive emotionally to everyone in the household, especially my father, reducing him to tears when he found out she had been receiving $1,000 a month from her mother, which would have had us staying up to date on rent payments. We have no idea what she did with the money. No matter the situation, she would try to twist it so that she would be the victim, even calling my father asking second opinions the party of persecuting Martha. Nothing is ever her fault, and it's always a misunderstanding. Then she started smoking in the garage. The door from the garage into the house is right across from my bedroom door, which is always open because our cats like sleeping on my bed with me. I have asthma. I woke up coughing and smelling cigarettes multiple times in one night because of her. She drove recklessly with my little sister and I in the car before, and I told my father what happened. When my father confronted her on it, she said that I was over-exaggerating, and that my sister and I, in our "it's too early for this, I'm gonna sleep and listen to my earbud" state, was stressing her out. A minor thing, but she endangered my sister's and my own cats. We have 2 strictly indoor cats, and her 2 were outdoor cats until they moved here. Her cats have taught mine how to sneak out the house when the front door isn't latched. She constantly leaves the front door open when she comes back in from smoking, and lets my cats get out. We live across the street from a huge lot of desert and where the coyotes roam every night, and she lets them out before. After she finally got a job, she didn't want to contribute her fair share of bills. My father asked her for half her paychecks every 2 weeks, and she claimed she could only give 25% because there are 4 people in the house. My sister and I are only there on the weekends, as we go to school outside of town an hour away and stay with other family during that time. She also apparently wasn't paying her car payments after she got a job, and she got a repossession notice which she hid from my father. Finally, after financially wrecking us, abusing my father emotionally and financially, endangering myself and my sister, doing drugs, taking money, stealing things from our rooms, endangering my cats and many other things, my father gave her 2 weeks to move out. She moved out a few days ago. She originally left her cats but failed to pay my father the $350 she owed him, so he said that we would be taking care of the cats until he got the money. She flipped and burst into the house when I was there alone, saying horrible things about my father and that her babies weren't safe there. When I called her out for not paying the money and everything, she told me that I was sipping the Kool-Aid, and I wish I was joking about this. I finally shut the door to my bedroom and started sobbing, as I couldn't handle this. She came after me by banging on my bedroom door and saying how horrible I was, and slammed the door in my face. I rang my father on FaceTime and opened up my bedroom door, and she bolted into the garage. I followed her while my father screamed at her to give me her key to the house. She ran past me screaming nonsense, went back to the living room, and I finally had had enough with my dad on the phone and let her have it. I was yelling, screaming, cursing, and was mad, and there was nothing for me to lose at this point. I finally told her to get the hell out of my house. She grabbed her cats by the scruff and ran out. I worry for those cats. I loved them dearly, and they became such a huge part of our family. I wish them nothing but comfort and happiness, despite their owner. This happened my junior year of high school. One of my best friends invited me to a Halloween party at her house with our school friends and some of her friends from her previous school. When I got there, my friend introduced me to this girl, and we actually hit it off really well. She told me that my friend had told her a lot about me, and they knew each other through their parents' work. We started talking about our interests and were decently flirting with each other. Now, I had gotten out of my first real relationship earlier that year, and I was not one to hop around from girl to girl. So being really flirty with someone on my first time meeting them was not something I was accustomed to doing. At the end of the night, we were sitting on the ground floor of my friend's house and ended up kissing for a little bit, which again was moving really fast for me. We started texting after that, but I kind of had a weird feeling about her and couldn't really see myself being in a relationship with her. But prior to realizing that, we had made plans for a date with my friend, who threw the party, and her boyfriend. When the day of the date came, I had come down with an 101.7 degree fever and felt very, very out of it. I called and explained to her that I was sick and was extremely sorry, but I wouldn't be able to make the date. This was a solid 3 or 4 hours before we were supposed to meet, so I wasn't pulling this last minute. Her response kicked off the most backwards period of my high school life. She responded by saying, "Well, I wasn't going to tell you this early, but I have brain cancer, so I don't have much time to go on dates." The strangest part was she asked me not to tell anyone about it. She stated that this was because her father didn't want her to use the cancer as a way to work people over and get stuff, which I found odd. Now a little backstory. I had a football coach who had passed away of cancer, and my friend's mum, the one who threw the party, also developed cancer around the same time. So the topic of cancer was heavy on my heart, and I felt incredible guilt, and being the emotionally charged person I am, decided to go on the date. During the date, she started saying that she really appreciated me coming and the way that I treated her. This made me feel better knowing that I was helping. At some point near the end of the date, we were walking towards my car when she again brought up that she appreciated the way I treat her. She followed it up by explaining that she wasn't used to guys treating her right because she was assaulted sexually when she was younger and actually had to have an abortion due to a forced pregnancy at the hand of a male relative of hers. My heart broke for her, as she sounded like she had endured a lot of hardship, on top of the fact that she was going to supposedly pass away from cancer next year. I was an emotional wreck following the date, because it was a lot for me to take in, but I knew that if I all of a sudden stopped speaking to her, I would never forgive myself. At this point, I had a small sense of suspicion of one of the things she told me, especially the part about not telling anyone under any circumstances. That, coupled with a couple of things that she had said on our date so far, about 3, regarding what she wanted to do with her future, saying things like, "I want to try out this hairstyle when I get older." After she said these things, she seemed to tense up a bit, but I chalked it up to her coming to terms with the fact that she would be unable to ever do these things. My suspicions grew, and eventually I decided to try and investigate. Her father was a doctor at the place where I went for doctor things, and my personal doctor was a family friend of mine who knew her father as well. I asked her if there was anything I could do to support or help her regarding her cancer. My doctor looked at me and said, "What cancer? She doesn't have cancer." I immediately became filled with anger and messaged her, telling her what I had learned. She told me that just the day before, she had learned that her diagnosis was a mistake, but her tone was very melodramatic and not at all what I would expect in response to finding out you don't have a deadly disease. She tried to cover her tracks and was asking me why I would question her and was saying, I thought you cared about me." I am livid, blocked her on everything as well as her number, and fall into a pretty deep depression for a few weeks because of how yanked I was about this girl and how this interaction led me to have major trust issues with women, which I still have not gotten over. A few weeks later, I receive a Facebook message request from a name I didn't recognize. It was her. She'd made a fake profile and was telling me I was being so immature and told me she had some explaining to do. I of course didn't answer, and that was the last I heard of her. Until a year and a half later, I had signed up for an ACT retake exam at my local university, and when I got there and sat down, I looked in front of me, and 3 seats to the right, guess who was there? We ended up talking and she apologized for everything that she did in a relatively believable manner, and I forgave her. I never found out if any of the other things she told me about her home life were true, but I made sure to avoid her at all costs, which was pain because she worked at the Cold Stone that was 2 minutes away from my house, and I had to go to the one downtown, which was a pain. I came across her real Facebook profile recently, and she seems to be doing well, which I'm glad to see. But as far as our interactions go, let's not meet again. I have a story to share about my ex. We met back in high school by chance. I was sitting in the library one early morning, doodling a little in a notebook, when Tim came up to me. We shared a lot of common interests, and I was deeply impressed by his drawing skills as he sketched a few drawers for me. For the first few years, things were fine. We were great friends and got to know one another very well. He was the oldest of 3 children and the only boy in his family that was fairly religious. Not the say grace and Hail Mary religious, but definitely the say grace over the meal for 5 minutes in church every Sunday religious. I'm not really religious myself, but I wouldn't call myself an atheist either. But I don't believe whatever it is demand we only talk to him in churches or over our food. Now Tim was a nice guy, and I did develop a crush on him, but I always felt whenever I made a move he would back off and avoid it. So I assumed it would never evolve into anything else. Things, however, changed at the end of my junior year. At the time, my family's visa in the US had been misfiled, and we were told we had 2 options: leave the US for a year and reapply, or fight it and risk being deported for 5. At the same time, my dad had been fired from his job for some BS reason, and my maternal grandmother wasn't doing so well. This in turn affected my mum very badly, because this was her last living parent and she hadn't had a chance to help her father during his last few years. This left her with a lot of guilt and what ifs and could haves that worried her endlessly. At the same time, I was entering my senior year, 3 credits short of graduation early, and my sister was in the 2nd year of college. There was also the fact that the USA was pretty much the only home I had ever known, so it was a question of when and not if. So my dad does the only thing he can think of. He asks some of his co-workers and family friends if they could take my sister and me in for the year, so that I could finish high school at least. The family I ended up living with for the year was absolutely wonderful. They only had 1 son, and we were friends, and they treated me like family from day one. The mum was Catholic, but she was one of the really great ones that wouldn't preach her faith into others or judge you by it. They had sort of adopted a lot of their son's friends who didn't have a nice home life, and when one of them came out as gay, she just smiled and said to him, "God doesn't make mistakes. You are exactly as you are supposed to be." I started to call them Mum and Dad version 2.0 really fast. I felt they deserved those titles too for everything they helped me with. They took me into their home and let me live with them absolutely free. All they asked for was that I studied hard in school, did a few chores when they asked, and respected their no alcohol and no sex rules. Easy. It was here, though, that Tim started to show a side that none of us liked. At first, it was just minor stuff. He would call almost daily to ask what I was doing and to hang out. And if I said I couldn't because of something, like studying or wanting to spend time with other friends, he would call my other parents to check if it were true. I wasn't new to relationships, but just because I was technically an illegal immigrant in the States at the time, I had so many things on my plate and didn't notice the signs. Things got even more stressful as my other father got prostate cancer and needed help getting to and from the hospital. It did it. So I had to prioritize my school and other family opposed to my boyfriend and friends with other responsibilities. For whatever reason, Tim didn't like that. He started demanding I spend more time with him than whatever I was doing, especially if I were free. I liked his family, they were nice people, but I'm also an introvert, and if I didn't have at least a little bit of solo time, I can't recharge properly. Soon the pressuring started. No, not to sleep together, but to go to church. His church. He kept saying how it was important, and I'd feel great going there and love it, and it was a Christian duty. This was right when the whole Muhammad drawing controversy happened, and I never found comforts in religion, much less the kind where they pressure on Christian duties. I avoided it for a while until I finally got the courage to tell him that I wasn't comfortable with the idea of going to church and giving everything I need to ensure to graduate, as well as my other family's own problems. I didn't feel I had time to add church to this list. You would think it was okay, but not for Tim. He got offended and started demanding that I give a better reason as to why not go. He even went as far as to go to my other mother and talk to her about the idea of us going to church. She thankfully told him that it was my choice, and regardless of his feelings about it, he needed to respect that. Then the creep factor went up a notch. He started showing up uninvited, both at my home and school. He had graduated at the time and was in college, and it was easy for him to get into school grounds since he had gone there too. He would go looking for me all over campus, trying to guess in which class I was in. Both my other parents and even other brother once caught him trying to peek into my room through the blinds to see if I were home, after asking if I really was there or not. My other mother told him that was inappropriate, while my other father told him to never do that again because it was unacceptable. My brother, at first, made a few jokes about him, calling him Ogles for trying to peep in. But after he caught Tim doing it again at 2 a.m. while I was asleep, he told him he was officially going into creeper territory and was going to kick his ass if he didn't stop. I stopped laughing whenever Tim was around. I become more and more reserved to the point where everyone but Tim commented that I didn't seem happy in the relationship at all. And it was also weird because the furthest we ever got to in dating was holding hands. He wouldn't even let me kiss him on the cheek in private. The final straw came when I was over at his place, trying to figure out how to tell him I wanted to go back to being friends, when his mum suddenly said that it was so nice that we were following tradition. I asked her what she meant, and she told me that she and her husband had been high school sweethearts and married right after high school, and that Tim was doing the same. I full-on panicked. We hadn't dated long. We barely did anything that could be called being a couple, and I was heading back to Denmark after I graduated. I was only 18, and nowhere near the age where I felt ready to marry. Not to mention with how conflicted I was feeling about the relationship. I couldn't see this ever working out. I was starting to see that our relationship, as a couple, was more toxic than healthy. The first chance I had, I told him in private that I didn't feel like this was working out. I still wanted to be kind and not embarrass him in front of his family, and I've never felt breakups should be a public display. Tim didn't take it well. He pleaded and begged, saying if I just tried to go to church with him I would see the light, and that it was ruining the family tradition. He tried to argue that if we married we could stay in the States, but I didn't want to marry for a green card. In the end, we both parted in tears and with things unresolved. A few weeks pass in silence, and I focus on school and just recharging. I'm getting ready to graduate and dealing with the reality that my biological parents won't get to see it because of our finances, and try to focus on the positives, that my other family and sister will at least be there to see me walk to fetch my diploma. Then, joy upon joys, my mum wrote to me, saying that she's going to visit for a week to see the graduation. I wanted both of them, but was so thankful that at least one of them would be there. I happily told my friends about it, and we all started talking about who we would give our graduation tickets to. I can't remember how many we had, but I remember I had a few left over after inviting my mum, other parents, and 2 brothers, and one of my friends asked if Tim was coming. I wasn't sure if I wanted him there after what happened, but at the same time, I had been back to his when we were friends. And like an idiot, I reached out and asked if he wanted to come as a friend. Tim became irate, ranting about how I was being so selfish. His anger was so explosive that it shocked me, and he finished it by saying to me, "There are 5 priorities in life: God, family, health, school, and friends, in that order. But you don't seem to get that. Your order is family, friends, school, health, and then God. You need to sort yourself out." At the time, I was way too shocked to react at first. Before I muttered a small, "But that's how I see things. They are what matters," before walking away, giving my extra ticket to a classmate who needed them more because he had one of those massive close-knit families. Graduation comes. I receive my diploma with cheers and pride, knowing that a high school diploma doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. To me, it's the proof I need to show I can dedicate my time to learn. I toss my cap, look for it afterwards, and immediately go off to get the real thing. Our school kept them hostage so we could behave during the ceremony and look for our family. When I found them, I can instantly tell something was off. They smile at me, but clearly something's bothering them. I asked them what was wrong, but they tried to brush it off, making an excuse that someone had those stupid annoying horns with them. I didn't believe them, and in the end my mum told me that Tim had showed up. She knew a little about the drama going on and figured he was just there to say congratulations. Spoiler, he wasn't. He said he needed to talk to her about me and how I needed to be saved, that I was going to hell because I wasn't embracing the church or what my womanly duties were meant to be. She asked him what he meant, and he said to obey her future husband. She lost it. I did too when she told me. We weren't engaged, and even if I was, I'm not some dog that's meant to follow orders. In the words of a pastor I once had, God made Eve from Adam's rib, not from his head, for she was not above him, not his foot, for he is not behind him, but his side, for she is his equal, and so that he can place his arms around her to protect her when needed. I'm not religious, but I've always liked this way of explaining Adam and Eve. So to hear that Tim thought I was his to order around made me furious. The last time I spoke with him, I yelled and threatened him, telling him how dare he think he had any right to decide what I deemed important in my life, and that he had another thing coming. He tried to argue that I needed to be saved or whatever, and I just screamed that I didn't need to be saved, I didn't want to be saved and that I was happy as I was. He stared at me, saying I didn't mean it. I told him I did, and that if he kept pushing it, I didn't want to speak to him again. I told him it was making our friendship unbearable, and if he didn't learn to respect other people's opinions, the next relationship he'd be in wouldn't work either. He got angry and said I was going to hell, in a fit of rage, and I told him that our relationship is hell, and that you've made it that way, to which he immediately left. I lived in the States for a month after that, and we didn't talk. His family tried to plead for me to apologize to Tim for what I had said, but told them that I had meant it because of his constant bullying. After that, I wasn't welcomed at their house anymore, not that I ever wanted to go back. Tim tried to reach out to me again during the years, with some sort of over-religious story and how I was like the main character. I told him I would like it if we could be friends, but if he was just going to send me more religious texts, he needed to delete my info. We haven't spoken since. He ended up dating a dear friend of mine a few years later, only to mess it up in the exact same way. Ironic, right? My friend had asked if I was okay with them dating, to which I told her honestly that that wasn't for me to decide. Just because he was my ex didn't give me any right to say who he could or couldn't date, but reminded her to not let him bully her about religion, as she had just left the Mormon church. To this day, I think he's still single and trying to find some girl he can save with religion. And while I wish for him to find his special someone someday that meets his needs willing, I will say this: Tim, I'm glad we never met again, and there is now an ocean between us, so I doubt we ever will. I have a story about a crazy ex. He told me he loved me on the first blind date. At one point during the date, the topic of kids came up. I forget exactly what he said, but his response was, "Don't you mean our kids?" There were so many red flags, but he was supposed to be the best man at my friend's wedding, and I the maid of honor, and she kept pressuring me to give him a chance. A week later, I told him I was going to class, so my phone was going to be off for the next 2 hours. Afterwards, I turned my phone back on to see I have 10 missed calls and countless texts asking me where I was and why I wasn't picking up. I freaked out and broke up with him over it. My friend called me screaming, telling me I broke his heart and that he was crying his eyes out over me. And I stupidly decided to take this guy back. Around Christmas time, I took him to my friend's Christmas party. Before we left, we exchanged gifts. He gave me an expensive $100 necklace, a giant box of chocolates that was almost as big as me, and I gave him a $25 band shirt from Hot Topic. Other crazy things he did during the course of our 2-week-long relationship. He told my dad when he first met him that he came from a family of heroin addicts and that he liked to drink and do drugs. It was the first time he told me that too. He constantly tried to force himself onto me, even within the presence of others, and tried to sleep with 9 other girls, including my friend, during the 2 weeks he claimed to love me. My friend and I didn't speak for a year after I finished with him for good because she was so mad at me. I was fired as the maid of honor as a result. Don't let people set you up on dates. It doesn't work out most of the time. At least not for me. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you did enjoy tonight's horrific ex stories. I certainly wouldn't ever want to encounter any of these people. If you did, don't forget to let me know. If there is a story of something horrific that has ever happened to you, feel free to email it to me. As always, I'd like to give a huge thank you to my awesome patrons for your amazing support. All the names of my patrons can be seen on screen, and for as little as $1 a month, you can receive a handful of rewards and get your name up at the end of every video, which is pretty cool. Videos that last forever, so you'll always be immortalized. If you want to. In any case, please be sure to let me know down below what you thought of the video. Got some pretty cool stories coming out soon. I am also incredibly sorry for the kind of impromptu disappearances. I'm trying really hard to keep producing content. I'm going to be honest with you, we have family coming over for the holidays. And as some of you may know, because you do listen to the end and read the secret message section, what's happening is that we've only just moved in recently to our new place, which we've had to furnish from nothing. So preparing everything has been quite a feat, to say the least. We are reaching the end, thankfully. But yeah, it's just all the effort of getting everything together and putting it together and doing everything. It's been a lot of work. There have been a lot of noisy people coming over, making noise during recording session times. Just people always coming in and out the house. I mean, I had the internet guy here until 7:30 because we have a Wi-Fi extender just so that the internet reaches downstairs. And that broke. So yeah, that was annoying. My office is downstairs, where I work, where I'm in right now. And I couldn't even get Wi-Fi in the room, which is pretty annoying. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of exemplifies how challenging things are when getting a new place to live. Alright then guys, enough of my ramblings. I'm sure you've heard enough of me already. I will be back tomorrow. So until then, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.